Hi everyone, good morning. Hello. I'm just kind of tired today. Like I'm super tired today. I deleted my template, you guys. I literally, I shut down my computer last night and I forgot to reset it, so my stuff is gone. But I mean, I have like this old one, but this one isn't as nice as the new one that I had built. Let me see if I can, I don't know what this is. Anyway, it's not like a huge deal, but the other one had notes on it though from like previous sessions, and so I'm kind of sad about that. I think this is okay, so the idea was that we could engulf on the session today, mainly if we cleared the channel and swept it. So we didn't end up sweeping here, and I was kind of disappointed because this was ahead of 12:30, so I figured if they break ahead of mid-session, like before 12:30, 12:45, 1 o'clock, then we have some good odds of getting an outside range today, but they ended up reducing it by close to almost 20 points. So otherwise, we would have probably been trading around that 6-1, 6-2. I don't know if you guys can see this, 6-3, which is half of today's range anyway. So like they would have taken us back to potentially 50% of the range. Pretty sure that's close to what it is. Let me see. It has to be somewhere around there. Yeah, like close to 6866. So that was a little bit disappointing. Thank you so much for the sub. So I figured they're probably going to end up stalling this if that's the case. But if they can bring it back around for mid-session, for not for real time, but for the actual session, like for the 115 period, 112, 115. 112, 115 is aligned to the actual closing session, okay? So the fact that they cleared right in here, and you see how they held above the channel here, guys? Let me just fix this because this is needs to be a little bit higher. Okay, you see how they held this right above the channel? Specifically off this 114, 115. That's really important, especially for like for durations until close. And by close, I mean like 5 p.m. So it's going to give us at least some odds of not getting stuck in the channel area and sitting there. And but the only issue is they didn't close above the channel before 1. So this 1 to 2 o'clock period can still have risk of going, you know, back and forth in the channel. But ideally this time we'd probably want to hold closer to like the 4-2, 4-7 area versus having to go all the way back. 5-2, 5-8 was the big overhead range that we were looking at. This is kind of more aligned with like last week's opening, closing ranges, especially around that 5-7, 5-7, 7-5. I figured that if we don't clear 5-8, they can stall, and that's exactly what they're doing. Oh, 5-8 was a pretty big overhead, same with 6-1. And all these little tiny reductions that they keep doing here, especially like right once those intervals slip over like 115, 116 are probably our reductions from getting us to that 50% range of 6866. Do you see it? This right here. Do you guys see what I'm saying? Because 6866 is half the range from today. So it seems like they just keep stalling those odds. But something I did notice though is when they did come out and break, they did it in like one big single stick. So we could see a lot of that today where they stall, they delay, and then they come back like later on and take out all the range in like 1 single minute or something like that. Kind of like what we saw back here, back here, back here. And my thoughts now, based on what they did during the 12:30 to 1 o'clock period, is I don't think that they could engulf this anymore based on that, but they could just end up flattening the week. Does that make sense? Like, if they want to bring this back to just some weekly ranges, it'd be more aligned to bring it back to 5/4. So if we get stuck in here, that's going to suck because then we're kind of just sitting back at the means and that doesn't really progress as much. But if they're able to kind of bring this back to, you know, like even the 6/6 area that kind of brings us back to last week's opening range, and then like the 8/3 area for this week, 8/1, 7/8, like these are all really, really, really important price points. The worst case scenario would be for them to just leave it stuck at 5/4 to 6/5 in the means. Does that make sense? Because that doesn't really leave much room for us from now until the close does it. Do you guys get what I'm saying or no? Like if they end up pinning it like this and they just keep it stuck right here, this isn't really going to give us any traction this afternoon. So if they're not going to engulf this or get this back into the zone, like back over 68.88 or 68.90, the best case scenario at that point would be to, at the very least, get it back to 6871, 78, maybe 83, like just kind of pin us back flat on the week. Okay. This is Does that make sense? I think the only way they can get us back to the zone today specifically, like back over 8.8, maybe after the bell. I don't really see them doing that in real time, but like we'd have to have some pretty aggressive sticks around our 130 through 136 and 148 period. Okay, like if they're still beneath 6.6 before 2, I highly doubt that that would be the case. Is everyone on the same page? Whereas if they can get this at least back to here, okay, like probably no later than 2, then we have some decent odds of at least getting core areas and then maybe getting like a zone entry into end of session today. I did figure that this was also a nice cup and handle pattern when they had that reversal come back down. So maybe for like longer duration continuation into Monday, like on the 15th. But the bigger overheads right now are going to be, basically we're at a battle of core ranges because we also have not tested 6, 7, 8, 8 from the prior week, which was our bigger downside support along with 9, 6. These were really big support areas for us that were not tested. And I noticed that off of our range highs and closing points, I think this should be a little bit higher, right? 9, 8, 7, 5. That's 132 points. Do you guys see that? So that's huge because those are really, really big spots for us. And those are areas that we never tested the weeks before that I had wanted us to test just to avoid future volatility risk. And then even from 6920, basically like minimum core areas, that kind of aligns back with 6788 zone entry. Off of our 2.5 close, you can see some confluence around 9.2. When looking at it from a 128 point ratio, you can see that confluence again around 9.6, 9.7. So in general, I would still write this down because 6.788, 6.796, those are some pretty big areas if we were to ever revisit that. Okay. And from this week, I did note this. So we did have like deep core retest to 6820s, which we finally got. The next range in there is kind of closer to this 8896, unless they hold a neutral range, which they did. 6805 gives you an odd of retracting because it's a neutral area. At the very least, to get back to a core range. Okay, so is everyone on the same page here? What they're trying to do basically is they're trying to break either end. Okay, so your core areas on the upside, okay, would be, your core areas on the upside are going to be 6866, 6871, 81, 83. Okay, on the downside it's 6766, 7176. Like, so do you see how right here is kind of like right in the middle? And if you hold a neutral zone, which is exactly what they're holding, this gives you odds of either end. So if they can take it back and clear this area today, then it'll avoid, you know, the deeper retracement back down to here. And this would get you back to the 6920s because that would be like your next core range. Everyone's on the same page? I need to make sure you guys understand like what this trade setup is here. So what they're doing at this point is they're kind of just taking it right in between. They're still leaving that odd. That's why I went long. Because I'm like, they don't usually just test downside, correct? Like I highly doubt that they would have taken this 6805 out and went all the way back to here without at least trying to get back here. Does that make sense? The first area that we had to break was 6822 and we struggled there a tiny bit. Okay, 6822 and 32, those were the first core ranges. And you can see how they struggled just a little bit, not much, but like back in here. And then they had that single stick and then broke, but then brought it back down in range. Closing it in the 50s, like between 5.2, 5.8, 6, like in that area there, that it's a little bit risky because that'll probably widen the odds of like, I would think that this area here is probably linked with the 9.6. Okay, this range, like it still would keep like this window open. Whereas had they failed to like retrace 2.2, 3.2, it probably would have pushed us down to 6.6. Does that make sense? Or like 7.1. But like right in the middle here would be around these 50s. That's why I think, I'm not sure if that's like, do you see what I mean? Especially off like max upside, like that 3.2. Do you see that? This is kind of like the in-between. So getting back into the zone around 68.88, 68.91, that would be like the best case scenario. If we're measuring off the actual highs, it's around that 7.388. Okay. Off the more ideal range lows, like closer to 7.1, it should be around like the zone. Do you see that? So it's not that the 50s are bad, but if you align this with the zone, like 6, 7, 8, 8, 9, 6, do you see how the 50s are more aligned with this? I need you guys to make sure that you're understanding this. If you don't understand, just tell me you don't understand, so at least I know. But basically, this area here, the 9.6 to 8.8, is more aligned with them keeping it stuck around 5.2, 5.8, 6.1, okay? So closing in here and staying stuck in here still keeps this risk on, okay? to this area here, which is why we'd probably want to just clear this range. That's probably why they're also keeping this a bit stuck, because technically speaking, that's not quite enough to fully reduce risk. And you can see how now we're working with core ranges, right? 51.75 points. 5.6 is a mid-core area. These areas here, like 66 points, would be back to 7.1. And then if we get back into this range in here, like 8.78, 8.3, 8.1, back to weekly ranges, those are core ratios, right? To core areas, 7.6, 7.8. These are probably going to be closer to the 88 point offsets, like around here. Whereas if we were to get back 103 points, that's 69.08. That's like our max core ratios, right? 103, 107 points. That would just take us back. This is one scenario too. I never talked about this, but if they were to retrace us back 103, 107 points, it would basically be a neutral zone to neutral zone break. I don't think we have those odds based on what they did between 12 and 1:30, but maybe for after the bell. Like, you know how yesterday they ramped us after the close? Based on them breaking here around 1:12, 1:15, we might have some odds after the close today too, just because this is aligned with the actual session close, not real time. But if they wanted a neutral to neutral break, it would be let me know if you guys get that. So it'd basically be like core ratios, so like core ranges, but off neutral areas. So if you can get a core ratio, that should be enough to set you up to get a core retest. Does that make sense? So like getting back to 69.08, 69.10 is technically enough to still get you a retest of 2.2, 2.8. And I would imagine that the 128 point break would be like right at the top of the zone, 6.933. Isn't that insane from this area here? And that's what we failed to break last night. That's kind of the reason why they stalled. And they hit, I think, like 111 points. So this would be the same thing as our 115.25 ratio. What's 115.5 points? Let's see who's so smart and knows this. And by the way, these are ratios here. So basically we stalled 110 yesterday. The max core ratio is usually 115. The exact amount is 115.25, 115.5, which would be the same thing as them breaking back 128 points off these lows. Okay, what's 100? Yeah, that's a third of 346 points. That's pretty interesting, isn't it? Like the correlations with this. And they already broke these ranges here anyway. Like if we want to get back to 346 points off these lows, we'd need back. Do you guys see the, I want you guys to see the alignments, okay? You see what I'm saying? If they got back from the November 21st opening range, it's the same thing as 346 points. It's the same thing as 128 points off these lows. It's the same thing as a core to core ratio. Okay, there's a lot of confluence around this 6908 area, 6910, and then that 6933 3233. So basically that area can net you back to that range there, but with the exception, obviously, that, or condition that you clear the 6671. Like, you have to at least get back over here. So far, they're doing a pretty bad job of clearing back some range. Remember how I was saying if they retrace this back at this point, though, we don't really want to come back beneath 4244. They're trying to kind of hold this range. What time is it? See, like, even like the 130, 136 period didn't really have much odds, but I didn't figure that 130, 136 would. Kind of waiting to see what they do just before 2, like closer to like the 48, 50 window. At least to see if they can test 5.8 and try getting to 6.6. So let's do our first pull here. I'm gonna ask you guys this actually. Max range for real-time session today. I'd be curious to see what you guys think. Stuck in the means. So 6.8, 5.2, 6.8, 5.8, 6.8, 6.4. Basically, you don't break 6.6. 6.8, 6.6, 6.8, 7, 1, 6.8, 7, 4, 6.8, 7.8, 6.8, 8.1, 6.8, 8.3, 8 zone entry. Okay, I'm going to set that for 5 minutes. Do we still have some risk for the session right now in terms of odds or downside? What do you guys think? Yes, right? Because we haven't even hit 50% of our range or 66 points, and there's still this window of risk in here that we have yet to test. What's one reason why I would, even though it would have been better if they tested this last week, right? Kind of like the 6820s, it would have been better if they tested it earlier in the week. Why would I want to maybe avoid this today though? Like, even though this is healthier for price action, it would have been better if they did it previously, not now. Why is that the case? Why do I want them to avoid this? I didn't want them to avoid 6820s, but I would want them to avoid this. Why do you guys think that is? And to try, you know, getting back at least to here. Why is that? Thanks, Mos. Yeah, there's barely any votes, 2 votes. No, we haven't tested that at all yet. That was something I would have preferred to have tested before. We never did test it. Testing it the previous weeks, like back in here, okay, would have been better. They didn't. They just held neutral, okay? So at this point in time, hint, hint, at this point in time, okay, why would we want to maybe just avoid this and try getting back At least to like, at least to flatten, like back at core ranges. If they're not going to take it to the zone, at least to flatten. Why would that be the case? They couldn't do it back in here, which would have been the more preferred point in time to have done this. Okay, especially before the 3rd and the 4th. No. To bearish engulf, you would have had to have taken out the highs. Think about it. It's not anything in specific to structure. It's more specific to something else. The answer's on the screen. What do we have coming up? Yeah, mid-month and what's our biggest flip date this month? What's the most important date for the end of the year that we've talked about now for like probably 3 months consistently? Okay. It's more in accordance to time. Yeah, the 16th is very, 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 very important. Okay. The 16th is what can give you extensions until when? Don't get this wrong, please. Because it's on every single report for like the last 2 months. The 16th can get you extensions until when? The 16th also opens up a period of an exhaustion or expansion period, okay? We only have 2 more sessions until those candles close. So today and Monday. Okay? Where they close today is very, very vital, obviously for Monday and for futures open on Sunday. Well, how long can the 16th extend you till? At a minimum. Well, the 16th can extend us at least until month end. Are we not in a very crucial window right here between now and the 16th? Look at the structure. The structure itself shows you the importance of this. Look. This is going to be a bit of a battle now from the 10th through the 16th for bulls and bears, and it's our 4th bar. Okay, so how important is closing price today, especially if that only gives us 1 more day, okay, until this candle closes? Like pretty important if they're not going to at least save at least half that range. Half that range is getting back over 6-6. That makes total sense because that's going to be our structure breaks from the 4th. Okay, the 3rd. The 3rd didn't give us the best close. It closed at 6.475. I would have preferred they had closed above 6.6. The 4th opened at 6-6. That's what gave us the probability to continue through the 10th. Okay, the 10th negated. This window here, it's very, very important at the very, very, very least that they close at least over 6-6. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, the market doesn't have to do all of this, but at least to keep odds somewhat favorable, I would say we'd probably need at least back over 6-6 today to at least give an odd of not fully exhausting, okay, by the 16th, even if that just means getting us back like this or something. Okay, do you see what I'm saying? And then it leaves this little window open through contract rollover happens then too, and then we've got obviously our end of month. Does that make sense? Yeah, with the channel not clearing, no one should be trading out of the money contracts. This is when you should have immediately started cutting them once they stopped during mid-session here. And they didn't clear the channel. Because now these odds align with after hours, not real time. And then range could be constricted now too. This was our odds if they wanted to engulf or get back, but they'd have to clear the channel. Clear the channel would have looked like this. And usually when you get that, you get like a straight move up to 6-6. You see what I'm saying? But these kind of stalls and like this stall, like notice that they're just stalling 5-8. I notice that they're doing something specific. They're basically just stalling 5-8, 5-9. They're just barely stalling 4-4, 4-6. They just stalled 4-8. Do you see it? There's like about 3-4 point reductions on each end. So that tells me that if and when they do come to test 6-6, they probably will stall 6-1, 6-2. Okay, so, do you get what I'm saying? They might stall the means. So that seems to be a common theme. And the way that this traded during this specific period here, okay, but then how they tried their best to not give it up right here gives us the odds of at least trying to get back and pin these areas here. So this could end up becoming a very pinnable afternoon, you guys, especially if they're not clearing this channel area before 2. Or at least retesting 5-8 before 2, then that way we know what our odds are. Is everyone on the same page? See, I thought I hit save on that and then it's still gone. Thanks, Eddie. I don't always keep track of everything though. I lose track sometimes too. There we go, it's finally trying. You see how it feels that pressure coming on? Between 148, 150? Especially around that 4-8. Because otherwise that would keep us stuck the entire afternoon. And staying stuck between a channel and the means would have been the worst case scenario. Because that means that they would have odds of pinning 6854, 6858 instead. Okay? That would have been our potential max range if they keep this stuck here during this period. So that would give us like an afternoon like this. That's basically, that would have implied that they stall 6-6, they don't get us over 6-4, and they keep us maybe stuck in here to repin prior week's close at 5-4, 5-7. Does that make sense? I think a lot of this too, okay, we can still have some odds. So can someone write this down, please? Izzy thinks that we can still potentially have odds for core areas, which would be between 6866, 71, 78, 83, basically back to weekly OR, if they can take out 66 before 3. I feel like that's probably the last condition, like for real time. Otherwise, if we're still stuck in here for that entire duration from 2 to 3 o'clock, then those odds heavily decrease. So far, at least they're trying their best to get us out of the channel before 2. So that would be some progress made in comparison to like the 1 to 2 p.m. period. Does that make sense, guys, or no? Like, you see between 1, how they stayed here. After 2, we want to be above this beige box, basically. We don't want to be stuck there. Because then at least that way we have odds of, you see this range from here to here? Okay. At least that way it'll give us odds of extending this period from at least here to here. Okay? Or completely exiting the channel, which could give us some odds of here to here. Thanks, Eddie. Yeah, I don't have, after I saw what they did around 12:30, 12:24, 12:24, 25 were my first flips for breaking this range, remember? As soon as I saw that play out, I'm like, yeah, they're definitely going to keep this a little bit stuck this afternoon. And it could be because they want to make it pinnable around prior weekly open, weekly close. Anytime Friday occurs, like, drill it into your brains that, like, they could trade around weekly ranges, okay? Prior weeks open, weekly close. Do you get what I'm saying? And those can become, like, your overhead ranges. It's pretty common. So, like, kind of to, like, net you flat for the week. So these areas here would net us flat for the week. Does that make sense? These are, like, very flattening ratios. These areas here, 6.4, 6.5, these areas here. Where's our, here. Does that give us much room for this afternoon if that ends up being the case? If they wanted to just flatten us for the week? No. Okay, so do you see the importance of, like, why I really wanted them to try clearing 5.8 by 115? 115, okay, is linked to end of session. So if they're struggling to even take out 5.7, 5.8, that could keep us stuck or delayed through end of day. That's how you create that really pinnable, sticky price action. Hopefully that's not the case. At least not to 5.7, 5.4. Like, at the very least, I would prefer that they can at least try 6.6, 7.2, like these areas here. And the reason I say 6.6 is it's 50% of the range, and it's also, like, mid ranges here between, like, when they started stalling. So sometimes, like, if they're basically, like, indecisive, undecided, where is this area here? Like, in this range in here, they might just take it, like, in between. Okay, so it'd be like a mid, like, not right back to these areas here, but not down to these areas here. Kind of like neutralizing it. Does that make sense? Which is why I think that area has some pretty good odds. And it's also half the range from today's session from highs to lows anyway. But you see, like, it did it again. If I reset, I don't know why that happens. At this point, at that point, I don't even care. So far they're still keeping this stuck in the channel before 2. That's not good. Because that can also still put us at that risk that we spoke about too. It's not just. I have to fix it this weekend. See, am I crazy? Where did that go? Do you guys see that? You see how it just disappears? I don't know why my trading view keeps doing that. Like, I didn't even touch anything. That's so weird. You guys they were keeping this in the channel for 2 o'clock. That's not good. This is definitely going to be a pinnable afternoon. Like, just based on the fact that they gave us a reduction stick right before 2 o'clock. I also noticed every reduction stick was about 5 to 6 points every single time. Okay, you see this? Like, every time they reduced us, they pushed us back down like 5, 6 points. So this would have easily gotten us out of the channel. Do you see what I'm saying? Back to 50, 50, 49. So, or even like the breaks of these areas here. So I would say with confidence that we're probably going to be stuck this afternoon. And the worst case scenario that I mentioned earlier this morning was keeping us stuck in the actual channel, like between 3844, which is a resting place. This is the area that brought volatility in the first place because they had gapped here, and gapping there is what, without any prior digestion, is what kind of created all of this back and forth to start with. Sorry guys, this is just stuck. There's no other way of putting that, like, especially with them stalling before too. The only other, like, I guess range that would put us at risk, like I said, is if they came back and back tested this 9.6 to 8.8 area. Like, this is still a pretty heavy area of risk, but I feel like because I would say that that would have only been the case if they hadn't taken out 5.2, 5.3, 5.6. So maybe that risk would increase if they don't take out or clear 5.8 within this hour. But otherwise, this seems like they want to just keep this kind of pinnable, like within these ranges that we discussed. I think I'm going to end the stream because there's no sense really if it's going to be some sideways back and forth price action for another hour. If I feel like there's anything valuable to add the last half hour of the day or something like that, maybe I'll start up an end of day close or something like that, or weekly close. But the most important thing here, I would say, is probably between like the 204, 07, 10. At least try taking out like 4.9. Like, they're kind of stalled like the channel right before, and at very crucial points in time too, like between 148, 150, 54. So at least to give it an odd of not staying stuck in the channel. Another scenario actually is if they're going to keep it in the channel, okay, and they can't take out 5.8, your best bet at that point would be to take it lower, back to the 20s. Does that make sense? Like, if you can't get these ranges here, you're better off getting 22, 24, 28. Does that make sense? Because at least this area can still give you an odd of this and this, okay? Whereas staying in the channel, it keeps you conflicted. So that would only be the case if they can't get us back over like 5.8, 6.6 or something like that. Does everyone at least have an idea of like what to expect potentially this afternoon on each end? So stalling 5.8 puts you at huge risk this afternoon of backtesting lows. You can't get over 5.866. We would much rather just close in the 68.20s. If we don't clear the channel by 3, we're just going to stay stuck this afternoon. So the only real progress you really need to make during this 2 to 3 o'clock period is at least take out 5.8. Okay, at least to give an odd of getting like these areas, maybe even if it's after the bell or whatever the case is, but or at least an odd to not just stay stuck all afternoon. So it's not really a huge condition, but it's something that would just reduce odds of staying stuck or tightening in a very small range. Yeah, there's no hoping though either. If it's not there, then if your risk reward is not there, then it's just not there. Plus, we already hit our targets for the week, like up to 69.20s anyway. 69.24 was a huge area for us, and they couldn't give us that little extra leg to 3.2, unfortunately. But if market has to reset, that's just how it is sometimes. Like, sometimes that's just it. You're maxed out for the week. So you don't have to sit around and waste time if your odds are pretty high to stay stuck. And we already knew that those odds increased heavily when they didn't sweep the channel. That was the first condition I set back here, is if they want to give an odd for this, they have to snap 2.2 and 3.2. They snapped 2.2, they did not snap 3.2, and they have to sweep the channel, which would have taken out all of this downside liquidity here. So as soon as that happened and they stalled, I was like, yeah, they're not gonna do that. Okay, I'll let you guys know if I decide to do an end of day close. Otherwise, have a good weekend, and I'll see you guys on Sunday.